Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing of the Sony Cyber-shot DSC-HX300. This is Sony's latest addition to the Cyber-shot family. Of course, this is a mega zoom camera, giving you the body of something very similar to a digital SLR, but the focal range that really would require an entire bag of lenses. And I say that because the camera we're looking at here has a 50x Carl Zeiss lens, which now ties it with the longest focal range available from any point-and-shoot camera on the market. So with that said, I'm going to go over the features. Wanted to just show you guys briefly the HX200V if you haven't seen this. This, of course, is the predecessor to the 300. Key differences I will go over, but just wanted to point out right now, you guys can see the picture on the box of the 300. You'll also notice it's not designated with a V like the 200 model. No GPS on board this camera, the new version. There is a GPS chipset on board here as well as compass. So that is a feature that was omitted. Otherwise, this camera seems to be, at least at face value, an upgrade in every possible way from the older 200V that I shared recently with you guys, because it is priced very, very well right now at $280 through many different vendors. But with that said, let's talk about the 300 and get it out of the box. Basically, first thing I want to point out, we're working with a new battery. This is the same battery that works with the RX100 as well as a bevy of Sony's newer Cyber-shot cameras. For some of you, it won't be a big deal because you're brand new to the system, but if you're like me, you may prefer the older battery that the 200V and 100V sport, which is the same battery found in many of Sony's compact handycam camcorders. So just something I wanted to point out. If you don't currently own these, you're going to have to buy some backups. Not a big deal. They're not overly expensive, and they are pretty efficient thus far in my testing with at least the RX100. In terms of actual upgrades to this bridge camera, you've got first and foremost a brand new sensor. At least that's what Sony is claiming right now. Higher rated, 20.4. That's well over the 18 offered in the last gen, but clearly more of an incremental change. And I know many of you out there, including myself personally, wouldn't have cared if Sony would have left the megapixel count where it was at. I think a lot of owners of the 100V felt that way about the 200V. But moving along, the most significant change for most of the mega zoom fans out there is the build in the focal range. We now have a 50x Carl Zeiss lens. The 200V was sporting a 30x, and in terms of actual focal range, 35mm equivalent, you're talking about the old 200V being 27 to 810. Here on this new camera, you've got 24 to 1200. So you're even starting out wider. Forget that you've gained that additional focal range, which is nearly double. So really impressive. And like I said, currently tied with Canon, as well as I think there is another manufacturer, I'm forgetting who right now, that also has a 50x. Nikon I think they top out at 42. So this is definitely looking to be king of the hill in terms of mega zooms, no question about it. Same LCD you'll find on the 200V, and then the movie capture modes, again, top of the line in the industry. That's what Sony really does best when it comes to digital imaging, no question. And that's why most of the broadcast shows you watch right now are filmed using Sony's equipment. But that aside, let's get this thing out of the box. Nothing really else noteworthy to point out here. Accessories very similar to what we had with the 200 and 100V. Basically a almost identical brand new carrying case, but clearly fitted to this one, since this does have a new build, slightly larger than the 200. You can also see the external battery charger and just a tripod. Nothing really unique there. Other thing I want to point out is the battery rating on this. Now, we did lose GPS, so you would think maybe that would lend itself to a higher battery rating, but after all, I did mention to you guys we're working with a new battery that is smaller, and as a result, we're getting less battery life. This camera is made in China, but so is the HX200V that I recently unboxed for you guys. Despite the fact that many of the early first runs were made in Japan, it seems like Sony has finally consolidated and gotten their manufacturing to exactly where they want. And now, you know, that the flooding, all of the natural disasters that they faced over the last several years, tsunamis, all of those things are at least in the past. So Sony has finally found its roots in terms of where it's manufacturing, and apparently it's predominantly China. But with that said, our warranty, Sony's usual documentation, your instruction manual here, I believe. And that's pretty much it. So very sparse amount of paperwork. Not that I'm really interested in the paperwork. Let's take a look at what we already know is in here. So Sony has pretty much abandoned, as many of you know, for those of you who don't, all of the traditional wall chargers. So even the last generation of this camera was also dependent on in-body charging. You will have to charge that battery in the camera, at least with what you're getting out of the box. So this is your AC adapter, USB port there for the actual charging cable and transfer cable, which I'm going to get to in a moment. We should also have a lens cap here. Yeah, pretty much the exact same lens cap that you'll find with the 200V and 100V. And you will have to tether that on if you'd like to, and I believe Sony will include a tether, much like they did with the other generations. And there is your USB transfer cable and charging cable. No Wi-Fi on this camera. Not quite sure why, because really I think that could have been a feature here. After all, this is a bridge camera that is trying to achieve everything that you could possibly want without having to carry around a big gear bag. But there's clearly a strong compromise made with any solution like this. But again, this is one of those compromises. You're moving to this BX1, which is a compact battery. Kind of ironic that it's the same battery that you'll find in a compact like the RX100, and now it's supporting, you know, something that is at least the size of a digital SLR. So with that said, I think, oh, there's still the camera strap there. Don't worry, I won't forget it. Let's just get down to business already here and get this thing out. And of course, we are immediately presented with that 50x sticker, because that is this, you know, the bragging right of this new model, really. If you don't care about the megapixel increase, which I wouldn't, if you don't care about the fact that now we've got a black shutter button instead of the silver found on the 200V, which are really trivial design changes. Really, this is just, in my opinion, giving it more of a professional look, which is a good thing, in my opinion, no question. But let's take a little quick tour here. Very similar in terms of design and feel right now. The zoom ring, almost identical, a little bit wider here. I can tell you guys I'm looking at the camera side by side right now. I'll even give you guys a quick look so you can see. And that's in part to do with the fact that we've got a much larger piece of glass. And the biggest bragging right, besides the fact that the glass has this range, is really that name you're looking at right there. Because you're not going to find a 50x Zeiss lens built into any other camera on the planet. So that's really the biggest calling card, in my opinion, of this model. That's why, even in my case, I love the fact that the GPS on board with the 200V works really well. But I might have to give it up in order to gain this focal range, because it's just simply unmatched. Viewfinder has stayed pretty much the same, although I can tell you the design is a little bit different. It seems like this comes out a little bit farther. The stereo microphone array, not as broad as the one on the 200V. I'm not sure if that's just an illusion based on the fact that the body is larger here. But of course, as I put it through the paces, I'll be able to let you guys know. In terms of the balance of the buttons, they're pretty much the same. No deviation here. Same layout for the most part. Everything looks identical to me, which is a good thing because it just builds off very solid functionality. The LCD screen does tilt out. Unfortunately, we still do not have the ability to take this all the way around like many other competing or competitor models have the ability to do self-portrait. But I don't think that's really a critical thing for a camera like this. After all, this camera is able to accomplish so much that you would need so much gear to do in any other environment or circumstance. Dedicated movie button up there, your traditional control dial for going through the menus. So it'll be interesting to see. Down here we've got our battery, which you can see is, it's tiny. When if I compare this to the 200V, it's laughable because the battery is literally just about 4 times the size of this gen battery. But it makes sense that Sony would migrate. I just didn't expect it in a body this size. Your dual card slot right there, which can only take 1 card, so don't be confused by the fact that I said dual. I just mean that it supports memory stick as well as standard SD cards. But overall, ergonomics have stayed pretty much the same, even though this is a larger camera, which is a good thing because it really does give you very much a almost identical feel to the entry-level alpha offerings that Sony has out there. And I don't just mean in terms of looks. Again, a side-by-side right here, just so you guys can see, get a little bit of an idea of the size difference between the two cameras. And there's no question, it's substantial, but in my opinion, most people that are picking up a camera like the 200V or the 300 in this case are going to be most impressed with that gain in optical zoom, as long as there hasn't been any tremendous sacrifice in image quality, which I'll be able to tell you guys in time. Want to also show you that camera strap. Also want to point out other critical enhancements that Sony's made here with this camera. Key ones that I think are noteworthy, which I clearly can't tell you guys if they are legitimate improvements yet. There's that strap, by the way. But critical ones, at least that I know of, which I don't think are included here because it's more subtle marketing than traditional, is that the optical steady shot has been improved. We're now working with beyond the traditional 3-point steady shot that Sony has been using for a couple of years now across cameras like these. They now have a stabilization system that's built into the front end of the lens, which they supposedly custom built for this camera because of that 50x Zeiss piece of glass in there. And essentially that works in control, or I should say it's a companion to, it's working with the 3-point system that you already have in place, and it'll essentially, it kind of borrows the technology that Sony's introduced into the brand new line of handycams for image stabilization, so that the camera really, at least by their measurement, has twice the stabilization in real-world use to the older generation. Whether or not that is a reality, I of course am going to update you guys. The other big gain is autofocus speed. And that's not to say that the 200V was slow. One of its bragging rights was that it was faster than the 100V. So it's logical to assume that this model would take that same step. Whether or not it's a realistic expectation that it's twice as fast, I'm not sure, because this lens gives you a 1200 millimeter reach, and that's not including the clear image zoom, which of course is Sony's proprietary equivalent to digital zoom that they've been using now for a while, which works great on the RX100, but you have to keep in mind the sensor in the RX100 is much larger than the sensor you'll find in this camera, which means that when you go to crop, there's a lot more detail in the image, even though the actual sensors have just about the same 20 megapixel rating. So completely different. Don't think because they're the same megapixel count you're getting the same image quality. You're not. Even though these are close in price, this is, by the way, I didn't mention it at the beginning of the video, a $499 camera that is dropping as we speak. Sony still has pre-order up, but as far as availability, you should be able to order it from vendors like Amazon and other online retailers, so I will include a link in the description. But overall, really excited about this. If the autofocus is really twice as fast, that means better performance in low light also, hopefully. And they really have been focusing, Sony, on trying to redefine themselves in just about every part of their photography lineup. So it's good to see real improvements. And certainly you could not chalk this up to being an incremental bump up. We didn't just get more megapixels, we got almost twice as much zoom, and with that, a whole new image stabilization system and autofocus system. So hopefully all of those things really do live up to the promise, because I think this is a phenomenal camera for people who do not want to take on an interchangeable lens system, but really don't want to compromise being able to get the shot they want. And also critical for those of you that really need that optical, or I should say electronic viewfinder. And as I said earlier, it is the same, at least what I've read, as the one that we had on the previous generation, the 200V. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.